In this interview, I talk with Austin Church, who runs a course coaching and services business. Does about $200,000 a year between the three. He's going to give you a breakdown of where that revenue comes and how he generates the leads and sales for those. Specifically, there's one part of the interview I wanted you to focus on, and it's how he did one podcast interview on a very small podcast, had a really cool hack to book the podcast interview, and turn that into $5,000 in sales, one service client and one coaching client. So be paying special attention to how that happened so you can replicate that for yourself and enjoy the interview. So I'll just start with this question first. What's your business? Like, what do you sell? Who do you serve?
So I have two businesses going right now. One is I'm a brand strategist and I help e-commerce founders build real brands and stand out online. The second one is I have a business boot camp for freelancers. I help freelancers find their most profitable and joyful work. Those two often don't go in the same phrase, and have a record year. And so it won't surprise you that a lot of money blockers come up, and I help freelancers uh, get okay with the idea of actually making like great money. And then the downsell, if people can't do the boot camp, is a course called Freelance Cake. So that's the DIY option.
So give me price points. You got the course, you have the boot camp, which is, I'm guessing, a live done with you kind of thing. And then,
6 week program.
okay. And then you have the done for you branding services. That's for like a whole different type of client or a
Sure.
different business altogether, I suppose.
Sure. So the course is $449.
Okay.
The boot camp is $1,500. I'm probably going to raise it to $2,250. It's still in process. And then the brand packages are anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000. It just kind of depends on scope.
Yeah. So what's revenue for all of that, and how does that break down roughly between product type? Just give people a general idea of how that happens in your business.
Sure. So like services is still definitely the lion's share of revenue, right?
Mhm.
And part of it is because I'm in the middle of like pivoting from the agency model, which I've had for years, to online leveraged model. So agency model revenue is probably, I don't know, 200 last year.
Okay.
And then the products like the courses and coaching side was 25 to 30.
Mhm.
There is some sort of overlap because some of my services clients actually end up entering one of my programs, and some of my I've had freelancers who are like, well, hey, can you help me with my brand? So hard to truly delineate, but it's around 225, 250.
So about 200,000 from the services, from the branding services,
Mhm.
about 30, 35 from the boot camping course. In the boot camping course, what's the general split between those two?
The boot camp is, I'll call it coaching, right? That's going to be 75%.
Okay.
And the course sales are 25%. And, it's funny, Brian, I know you teach and growth, you like, hey, like pay attention to what wants to happen.
Mm.
Um, I was just doing off the cuff coaching, one-on-one coaching. I love helping freelancers make more money because they always end up wanting to do super interesting things like
Mm.
adopt a kid. Or I had one lady wanted to take her grandmother to Japan to see her sister for the first time in years. And I'm like,
Wow.
yes, we need to make that happen. Come on.
Yeah.
But so in last year, so much of my easiest revenue came from coaching.
Mm.
It was harder to sell the course at a lower price point than it was to sell coaching at a much higher price point. I actually reached out to Matt
Mm.
Zavadil, and I was like, I think we actually need to change my marketing plan because the thing that I thought I was going to sell is harder to sell. And there's some work to be done there. But
Yeah.
that's when I actually rolled out the group coaching program. And it was so fun, so easy, like light. You
Mm.
probably have work that you do that is just, gosh, I feel like I'm cheating at life because this is easy. That was the group coaching for me. And I followed your program. I sold it before I made it. I made it each week. It was awesome. So that's why I'm so focused on that now, is that's what wanted to happen after 2020.
So how many months ago did you start selling the group coaching?
That was late February is when I did the launch exclusively to my list, which is still pretty small.
Late February, as in 2 months ago or 14
Two,
months
mo-
ago?
2 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've brought in what, 15, 16 clients to that at $1,500 each?
No, it's just 3 clients, and it was a beta. And I
Okay.
was very clear that I'm like,
Yeah.
people are signing up for a grand experiment. But in 2020,
Mm.
75% of my revenue was these one-off coach. Like
Gotcha. So you
had.
packaged up the coaching, the one-off kind of random into a specific thing. Now you sell
Mhm.
3 copies at 1,500. A very replicatable boot camp concept.
That's right. So I was
Okay.
doing one-to-one, and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, I think I can find a creative way to make this one-to-many. And
Yeah.
so the beta of that was, let me see if this would even work. And it worked really, really well. Got paid to create my own testimonials, and now I'm like amped up. So
That's awesome. So you've used partnerships to generate leads for your list that you've sold the services, you've sold the coaching, you've
yes.
sold the new coaching, you've sold the courses to. Um, you've done lots of different types of partnerships. What's one that sticks out as being one of the more impactful ones you've done?
So I want to talk about Podia in a second because that one has just been awesome. But the 3 people that have gone through the business bootcamp for freelancers,
Mm.
all 3 of them came from partnerships.
Mm.
One of them was last July. I showed up and I taught a free workshop to the audience of a CPA who focuses on freelancers and online creators.
Yeah.
And the second person who signed up for the boot camp, she showed up to a free workshop I taught to the audience of Knoxville Entrepreneur Center.
Mm.
And then the third person, a guy, he heard about me through a podcast episode. I came on as a guest, and then he reached out over LinkedIn. And so I like connected the dots. I was like, wait a second. All 3 of the folks who were willing to give me $1,500 had spent time with me in some form or fashion. They had heard my voice or they'd seen my face. And I'm like, okay, so how do you do like emotional connections at scale?
Mm.
And it's partnerships,
Yeah.
right? I have some other thoughts on that. That may be a conversation for another time, but I'm excited about partnerships because it's one way to help people who don't know you make an emotional connection with you quickly.
Mm.
And down the road, if people kind of come into your ecosystem, like I've been emailing people every week, but what ultimately got people into my ecosystem was spending a little bit of time with me, getting value out of that. And then later on, when I launched this premium offer, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So
what was the podcast? You mentioned the third client. The third one came from a podcast you did. Do you remember which one that was?
I think it's called Hustle to Freedom. A guy named Ryan Helms, who I mentioned crossover.
Yeah.
He was the host of the podcast, Brian.
Yeah.
And then he reached out to me about consulting.
Oh, really? No way.
So
Yeah.
I like it's double dipping, right? Like he ultimately helped generate a lead who became a coaching client, and then he became a client. And I'm like, again, this is winning at life. Like everybody needs to be doing this, right?
Yeah.
And it's just fun to show up and have interesting conversations with interesting people.
I was interviewing Dustin Reichman. He runs a company called Fire Creek Snacks a month or 2 ago, and he called that the halo effect. He did a podcast interview on the Bigger Pockets business podcast, or I mean, they have like a sub podcast, not the big one, the real estate one, but the sub ones. And he picked up, I don't know, 100 trial customers, and they sell like subscription box meat snack things. So I picked up like 100 customers from it. And but then like the main meat snack buyer of Walmart reached out to him.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, hey, would you want your product to be carried in Walmart? He's like, let me think. Yeah, let's talk. So I don't know if that's
I'm at least open to one conversation with you about that. I mean, it's true, like that cognitive bias, the halo effect. I think there's another thing that happens with partnerships too, is like when people put you in front of their audience, they're often asking you to talk about your deeper purpose, your beliefs, your values, your identities. Like I'm a husband, I'm a father. I always talk about field trip freedom. I am self-employed because I want to be able to go on every field trip with my kids.
Mm.
So when people connect with you as a person, the halo effect of that is like, well, oh, his program must be good. right? So you can kind of do that at scale with different types of partnerships.
So talk about the podcast. What was the name of it again?
Hustle to Freedom.
Hustle to Freedom. So how did you identify them to reach out to go on their podcast? What made them pop on your radar?
So, I mean, my primary audience is freelance creatives. And I mean, there are a bunch of different ways that you can identify, okay, who's already got the audience that I want to get in front of. And so either was doing searches, on the podcast, like just searching on iTunes, different podcasts that, pop up for the word freelance. There's a tool called Podmatch that you can use. I forget, there are several other tools that sort of aggregate all of the podcasts out there, and then you can use their advanced search criteria, plug in different keywords. But that's how I eventually found him. And then, I mean, you kind of know the drill. I just wrote him an email. No, that's not true. This was really cool because I actually went to his website and found this obscure link where I could just book the podcast interview without sending any kind of pitch. And I was like, this may be rejected later, but I'm just going to roll with it for now. Right. So I booked the podcast and then got an email from him. And he was like, well, I guess it looks like and he lives in Atlanta and I'm in Knoxville. So, it just, anytime someone's in your neck of the woods, I think maybe there's a little bit of sort of credibility that comes with that, regional credibility. But anyway, it ended up being like just a lot of fun, that whole conversation, and easier than some of them because I didn't actually have to pitch.
Yeah. So with that one, you wound up generating a $1,500 customer to the boot camp and a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 customer with him and branding.
$3,500. That's another. It's a strategy as a standalone product. I call it a wayfinding workshop. So it's 3 hours, and then I send the plan, or you can think of it as a report or as a plan, but ask the client, pick one business problem you want to solve. And we'll identify the various paths available to you. We'll weigh the pros and cons of each one. We'll pick the one that's most viable for budget or for timeline or whatever. We'll define initial action steps. And so after 3 hours, I'll bring in outside perspective and I'll deliver after the fact a very clean, actionable plan. So that's what he bought.
That's an interesting product. Okay. So one podcast, $5,000. You didn't have to pitch him. That one wound up having some random link you found on the site. You mentioned earlier Podia and a partnership you've done with them. What happened there? What was the result of that? And let's walk back through how you found them and identified them and what the partnership was.
Sure. So that one was another home run, but it became a home run over time. Right. And if there's one thing I could kind of teach about partnerships, it's that, like, no matter how small it seems at first, think about it like you're showing up to an arena of 10,000 people and like do your very best to even sort of shepherd and take care of very small opportunities, because you never know what it could become, right? So I ended up reaching out to Len Marketing. He's the CMO. He gave a talk at Craft and Commerce, which is ConvertKit's conference back in 2019. I thought he gave a great talk. And I just reached out to him and said, hey, I actually took your advice, actually launched a course, made a bunch of mistakes, but ended up having a successful launch. Could I write a blog post for your blog about taking your advice and running with it? And he was like, well, yeah. And so he connected me with a woman named Lauren Cochran. She's their editor-in-chief, like head of content, right? And we just really got along. She ended up offering me a job. She was like, you don't want to like create content like this full time, do you? And I was like, I would actually love to work with you on an ongoing basis, but I'm not interested in like being content writer for someone else right now, but thank you. Yeah. Anyway, Lynn tweeted about the article that I wrote, and it was long form. It was 3,000 or 4,000 words. Like I spent a crap ton of time on it. But again, I'm like, over deliver on every single partnership. Make it easy for your partner. We want to work with people who make things easy for us, honestly. And so if you over deliver, you never know. And so it was one of those you never know situations where after the post went live, Lynn, CMO, he tweets about it per growth use training, right? I took a screenshot of his tweet, sent it to him, and I said, I'm glad you liked the article so much. I actually have an idea about doing can I teach a workshop for all of Podia's creators about how to build a brand? So I'm like, maybe I could get some service clients out of this, right? Yeah. And he was like, well, let me connect you with Matt Ragland, who at the time is like head of partnerships or head of like customer success. I forget his actual title, but so we got on a call and he was like, yeah, I love this. What would it look like? So again, I'm like trying to over deliver. I'm like, let me create all the graphics for you. Like I tried to take as much work off his plate and put it on mine as I could. That was, I forget. It was last year. Let's say it was June. I forget the actual date, but I taught the workshop. It went over really, really well. And then he mentioned that they had this event coming up called Podia. I think it was called Podia Create Summit. And so he said, do you want to teach the same thing or something similar at this summit? And I was like, sure. Like that would be, yeah. I mean, you want to put me in front of an audience again? Yeah. I felt a little embarrassed or sheepish afterwards because like the keynote talk was Ramit Sethi, and I'm a big Ramit fan, right? And I'm looking at all the other speakers, and I'm like, I do not deserve to be a speaker at this summit. Like, I'm the least impressive person on this list. But he said, oh, and by the way, we're paying speakers. So I got paid. Yeah. And that was like my first ever paid speaking gig. And Matt's awesome. I really enjoy everyone at Podia. I think they've got a good thing going, but that's how the whole partnership unfolded. Mm-hmm. One thing led to the second thing led to the third thing. I ended up getting paid to speak, got to learn from some really cool people. And it was just, like I said, it was a home run. It was single. I think with partnerships, each single earns your next at bat. And eventually you're going to hit a home run. Eventually you may have that sort of breakthrough moment, but you have to keep showing up and you have to keep making the singles, hitting the singles. Do people make singles? No, they don't. I don't know baseball well.
You can hit a single, I guess.
They get the single, and eventually with your next at bat, you'll hit a home run.
Yeah. So how did you identify Podia to begin with? What put them on your radar?
So I was thinking about like, okay, which tools do I already use that I like? Mm-hmm. And I had launched the course and I'd used Podia, and I'd run into a few hiccups. It happens with any tool, with any platform, and their support was awesome. And so I love Podia. I'm a big fan of their product. And so and you've talked about this a little bit. It's like, just show up and share the enthusiasm you've already got. Like, doesn't matter how big people are, they still appreciate knowing that the work they're doing is making a positive impact. Mm-hmm. So and again, I just feel like I'm parroting you back to you, but it's like, if you know that you are the case study that they would love to have, show up and say, I'm your case study. Mm-hmm. Can I share my story with your audience? And I'd love to make you look good in the process. It's back in my tech startup days, I had a mentor who said, always find a way to make somebody else the hero. Yeah. And I love that, right? So it's like, when I show up and do a partnership, I want to make that podcast host look awesome. I want to make Lauren Cochran, the editor at Podia, look awesome. I want to make Lynn Markadin look awesome. I want to make Matt Ragland look like a hero. And I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, it's like, you want to be successful, like help enough other people succeed and you'll get the success you want. So
did you see any measurable business growth from outside of being paid to speak at the summit, from the blog post, the webinar, or the summit speech? Did you see lead generation or trackable sales from that?
Definitely lead generation. I mean, I would pick up email subscribers
Mm-hmm.
because I would just say, hey, and at the end of my talks, I'm going to tell people where they can go get the worksheets, where they can go get the thing, right? And I will say that yes, a woman named Megan bought my course
Mm-hmm.
because of one of my Podia talks. I can't
Yeah.
remember which one. So, some of them are indirect. It's just people who are now on my list and hearing from me weekly. Obviously, there's directly attributable sale of the course too. And all that, I trust the process. It's going to aggregate over time. It's going to grow over time.
Yeah. That's awesome. What's your plan with partnerships going forward?
To scale them. I've finally, it's been kind of a struggle. I onboarded 2 virtual assistants so that I can actually offload a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to delegate partnerships to my social media manager and copywriter, but I was getting a 50 to 60% yes rate. And even some of the people who said no, it was just like, not yet.
Yeah.
And some of those have actually become a yes because I politely keep in touch. Um, I think it's worth noting that one of my blockers around partnerships was feeling like I'm being tacky to ask or feeling like I'm getting on people's nerves. But it is so true that the best, I've gotten easy yeses, but a lot of the biggest opportunities have come on the third or fourth or fifth follow up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got 2 yeses to the 2 biggest podcasts I've been on the same day when I just said, hey, clearly you didn't like my pitch. You
Yeah.
win some, you lose some. Ha ha ha. If there is a way that I can get better, I'd love if you'd give me 1 or 2 minutes, take 1 or 2 minutes and give me some feedback.
Yeah.
And 2 people responded to that email on the same day and more or less just said, oh, actually right now is just right. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you will miss out on your best opportunities if you let a kind of squeamishness or being overly self-conscious or being too sensitive to silence is not rejection.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know
Usually
you
just
know
means they're
all that.
busy. Like people are
Yeah, I
just
mean,
like
it's like
legitimately
I
busy.
got 1,000 emails yesterday, so I'm sorry answering yours wasn't my top priority, Mr. Stranger, right? But anyway, I'm going to scale up partnerships. I 100% believe in the process, but doing it well takes time and takes art. And if you're going to say yes to doing this well, what are you going to say no to?
Yeah.
It's just taken me time to, sort of set up the logistics around, I need to say no to this stuff and delegate.
What's been appealing to you about partnerships versus other marketing strategies that you've tried?
Part of it is teaching. I love teaching what I know. I love helping other people succeed. So to just show up and teach on subjects I'm passionate about is kind of a no-brainer for me. I still get a little bit of stage fright,
Mm.
but I've found that with podcasts and online workshops, that doesn't exist. Um, it's not a live audience. It's a live audience, but they're not in person. Like
Yeah.
they can't tar and feather me and run me out of town, right? Um, Sorry, what was the question again? I
What
lost my train
appeals
of
to you
thought.
about doing partnerships? You obviously are a fan and are using them and are dedicated to them. What appeals to you about using them versus other marketing channels like ads or
Right.
content or other things that you might have tried?
They're free for the most part. They're
Mm.
infinitely scalable. I mean, there's always another audience that you could teach. And I totally believe in paid ads, totally believe in organic SEO. There are a bunch of different strategies out there,
Mhm.
but partnerships are a strategy where the number of pitches you send out and percentage wise, to some degree, the number of partnerships that you win, that you get, totally in your control.
Yeah.
So I think for folks who they're like, man, I'm not seeing the growth that I want. I'm like, it may be because you're too dependent on Google's algorithm.
Mm.
You're too dependent on your return on ad spend. Get a little bit more creative. And honestly, it's fun.
Yeah.
Like just meeting new people. And like, I just actually finished an interview before you and I got on here, and it was like delightful. Like we're
Yeah.
talking about, I'm like, I can't wait to hang out with that person sometime in the distant future when we're seeing each other again. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this has been great, man. I love one podcast interview that led to $5,000. I love one random outreach that led to a guest post that led to a webinar that led to a summit, you being paid to do the summit itself, and you picking up at least one directly attributable client from it. And who knows what other halo effect stuff. So thanks so much for sharing. This has been great. And appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And hey, y'all, do partnerships. You won't regret it.
All right. Thanks for listening in on my conversation with Austin Church. If you want to check out his business, head over to freelancecake.com. If you want my team and I to audit your business, find the partnership opportunities that you have, and coach you through executing them just like we did for Austin, let's talk. Go to growthsouls.com/apply, and we'll set up a free strategy call with you. We'll talk through your business, show you how this same approach of borrowing other people's audiences could work for you and your business, and see if it's a good fit to work together. So go to growthsouls.com/apply and book that now. Hope to talk to you soon.